They didn't just call the cops on me. They called the entire police department, practically screaming into the phone that a disheveled trespasser was attempting to break into $1 million estate. And all I was doing was parking my truck, my mud-caked, glorious four-wheel drive behemoth of a truck, right next to the barn on the land I own, the land my family has owned for 3 generations. This was my ranch, my retreat, the place I go to escape the absolute madness of the corporate world. And yet there she was, the infamous HOA Karen, standing on the immaculate regulation height curb of her perfectly beige house, with her arms crossed so tightly her knuckles were white, looking at me like I was a cockroach that dared to crawl out onto her pristine kitchen counter. Her face was a mask of self-righteous fury, and the moment I stepped out smelling faintly of diesel and honest sweat, she pointed a trembling, manicured finger at me and yelled, You are in violation of no less than 5 covenants. We called the authorities. You will be arrested." I just stood there letting the dry, hot wind whip around me, and I smiled, a slow, predatory smile that I usually reserve for hostile corporate takeovers. Because what this woman, this tiny tyrant of the cul-de-sac, didn't know was that while she was busy monitoring the shade of my mailbox, I was busy monitoring her entire industry. Was I wrong for what I did next, for letting the biggest secret of my professional life hit her like a wrecking ball? Tell me if you would have done the same thing. You see, to understand why her little high-pitched threat meant absolutely nothing to me, you have to understand who I am, or rather, who the world knows me as. I'm not just some guy who owns a ranch on the outskirts of Phoenix. My name is Alexander Alex Thorne, and I am the CEO of Omni Governance Holdings. Now, that name might not mean anything to you, but let me break it down. Omni Governance Holdings is the parent company that owns and operates the management firms for over 60% of all homeowners associations, condominium associations, and planned community boards in the United States. When a new community is built, they contract a property management firm to handle the day-to-day operations, the landscaping, the fee collection, the bylaw enforcement, all the tedious, nitpicky stuff. My company owns almost all of those firms. We are the silent, invisible hand that guides the entire HOA industry. When an HOA management company sends a nastygram about your petunias being the wrong color, the paper trail eventually leads straight to my desk. I oversee literally millions of homeowners, including, and this is the delicious irony, every single resident in the estates at Sunblaze Mesa. Guess which is the ridiculously pretentious name for the development that had sprung up right on the edge of my family's land, slowly encroaching on the quiet life I held so dear. My ranch, which I inherited from my grandfather, is called the Last Mesa. It's about 40 acres of untouched desert beauty, a small house, a big barn, a corral, and a lot of glorious empty space. For years, it was just my escape. I'd fly out of New York City, ditch the tailored suits for dusty jeans, and just breathe. But about 3 years ago, a massive development company bought the 1,000 acres bordering mine and built the estates. It was the usual cookie-cutter McMansion hellscape, all stucco, fake stone accents, and bylaws designed to crush the spirit. I watched, horrified, as my quiet desert road became a 2-lane asphalt jungle. And then came the first sign that my piece was over. The sign for the HOA, a ridiculous bronze plaque that proclaimed their authority. But it wasn't until I started noticing the cars that the real trouble started. People started treating my private road, which is clearly marked as a convenient turnaround or worse, a private dog walking path. I ignored it mostly. I'm a patient man, after all. You don't run a multi-billion-dollar corporation without patience. The root of the problem, was my new neighbor, Pamela, the aforementioned HOA Karen. Pamela and her husband, a perpetually terrified-looking man named Bob, had bought the largest house on the development. One of those ridiculous homes with a 3-car garage and a tiny, useless patch of grass they probably paid someone $50 an hour to mow. Pamela quickly became the head of the Architectural Review Board, the treasurer, and unofficially the self-appointed moral and aesthetic authority of the entire development. She took the HOA bylaws, which, let's be honest, were written by one of my subsidiary lawyers in a state of caffeine-fueled cynicism, and wielded them like a sword of judgment. She'd fine people for having an unapproved welcome mat, for leaving a garbage bin out for an extra hour, or for having a shade of white paint that was too stark. She was a menace, a truly dedicated bureaucrat of the banal. My issues with her started subtly. First, she left a neatly printed, Laminated note in my mailbox, my private mailbox, mind you, which is nowhere near the estate's, complaining that my mailbox was non-compliant with the community standards, even though I was outside the community boundary. I tossed it. Then came the courtesy reminder about my fencing. My grandfather's original barbed wire fence, which perfectly suited a desert ranch, was deemed a blight on the landscape and a safety hazard to the children. I sent her back a copy of my property deed and a note that simply said, "My land." My fence, end of discussion. That only fueled her. She saw me, the man in the dirty truck who only showed up every few months, as an outsider, a lesser person whose ranch was devaluing her estate. She had a neighborly, but completely unwarranted sense of jurisdiction over my life. I was flying in from a brutal, week-long negotiation in Tokyo. I was exhausted. My private jet landed at a small regional airport and I hopped into my truck, the one I keep garaged out here. I hadn't been to the last mesa in nearly 5 months. I was looking forward to nothing more than a long shower, a thick steak, and absolute silence. It was a Tuesday morning about 9 a.m. I drove my truck, the Desert King as I call it, down the dusty private access road, and when I reached the gate, which I keep locked with a heavy-duty, industrial-grade chain and padlock, I noticed something new. A chain, a shiny, new, brightly colored yellow chain, had been strung across the end of my driveway, right where it meets the main, newly paved road that the estates now claimed as their own. It was a cheap plastic barrier, the kind you'd see at a construction site, but it had a handwritten sign taped to it that read, "Private community access only. All unauthorized vehicles will be towed and fined $500. The estates at Sunblaze Mesa HOA." My blood pressure, which had been blissfully low for about 4 minutes, spiked. They had blocked my access to my property. I pulled out my phone and tried to call the local sheriff, thinking it was a simple trespass issue. But I had almost no service. I was too tired for a fight, so I got out, walked up to the yellow plastic chain, and with one swift, satisfying yank, I snapped it right in the middle. I drove through, parked my truck next to the barn, and started unloading my bags. That's when Pamela, who must have been watching me like a hawk from her kitchen window, burst out of her house like a human torpedo. She was already halfway through her tirade when I slammed the truck door shut. "I cannot believe the audacity, the sheer nerve. You just destroyed community property. That chain was put there for security. You are not on the approved resident list, and I am telling you right now you are trespassing. This is a gated community," she shrieked, her voice hitting a frequency that made my teeth hurt. She was standing barely 10 feet from me, her face red, her whole body vibrating with indignation. "Pamela," I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. I looked her dead in the eye. "This is my ranch. This is my private access road. Your community ends at the property line, which is 50 yards back there. You trespassed to put that chain up, and you trespassed to stand here and harass me. Get off my property now." She scoffed, a truly magnificent sound of pure, unadulterated snobbery. "Don't you dare lecture me, sir. I'm a board member. I know the rules. The developer gave us an easement over this whole area. Your little shack is going to be part of the new Phase 3 anyway, so you might as well get used to the rules." I called the police. They are on their way. You'll be lucky if they don't seize that hideous truck for a code violation. That was the last straw. The truck comment, the little shack comment, and the flat-out lie about Phase 3. I knew there was no Phase 3. I knew every piece of paperwork filed by that developer. I knew the deed restrictions, the development plans, and the entire financial structure of the estates. I was the one who signed off on the financing structure, for crying out loud. I had let this woman believe she had authority over me for too long, simply because I valued my privacy more than proving a point. But no more, so that's the situation I was in. The police were coming because a megalomaniacal HOA leader, who had illegally encroached on my private property, decided I was a threat. She was standing there, chest puffed out, waiting for her official backup to arrive and validate her power trip. She was convinced she was about to watch a criminal get hauled away. I had access to a nuclear option, a way to not just win this battle, but to dismantle her entire tiny kingdom. I could expose her lie about the easement. I could prove her illegal use of community funds to put up that chain, and I could, with a few phone calls, completely reorganize the management of her beloved HOA. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let her have her moment of glory with the police? Or would you have dropped the biggest corporate bomb in the history of suburban drama? Tell me your move. I watched her for a moment, a tiny smile playing on my lips. She misread it completely. She thought it was a nervous, guilty smile. "Oh, you're starting to sweat now, aren't you?" she hissed, pulling out her phone, probably to record my perp walk. I reached into the inside pocket of my travel blazer, which was still draped over my arm, and pulled out my corporate identity card. It wasn't a standard ID. It was thick, metal, and had an embedded chip and a holographic seal, designating me as the CEO of Omni Governance Holdings. I also pulled out a business card for the CEO, and another, less formal one, that simply said Alex Thorne, owner of the Last Mesa. I handed her the business card for Omni Governance first. "Take a look at this, Pamela," I said, my voice now dropping to a tone that I use when I'm about to fire a senior vice president, a tone that is devoid of emotion but thick with undeniable authority. She looked at the card, then back at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Omni Governance Holdings. What is this, some kind of joke? A gardening company?" "No, Pamela," I replied, taking a step closer, forcing her to look up at me. "Omni Governance Holdings owns the property management firm that runs your little estates at Sunblaze Mesa community. We own the parent company of the company that handles your landscaping contracts, your fee collection, and yes, your bylaw enforcement. Every single piece of paper, every fine, every meeting minute, and every budget dollar runs through a company that ultimately reports to me." I paused, letting the words sink in. The color was draining from her face, replaced by a pasty, sickly white. "You're lying," she whispered, shaking her head. "You're just the ranch guy. You drive a dirty truck. You're trying to scare me." I held out the metallic ID card. "Scan it. Better yet, call the number on the back of the business card. It goes to my executive assistant, and she's not having a good day. Tell her you're the head of the ARC for Sunblaze Mesa, and you're having a dispute with Alexander Thorne. She will tell you exactly who I am." The silence that followed was deafening. She was frozen, the business card trembling between her fingers. She was doing the mental math. If he's the CEO of the company that owns my HOA, then he's not just a resident. He is the god of my entire social structure. The police sirens, faint at first, were getting closer, a distant wail promising official intervention. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, Pamela," I continued, pressing my advantage. "The easement you mentioned? It doesn't exist. The Phase 3 development you're so worried about? It was canceled 2 years ago. And the money you used to buy and install that illegal chain on my private road? That came out of the maintenance fund, which is a massive breach of fiduciary duty and is an offense I take very seriously. You, as a board member, are personally liable for that." The patrol car, lights flashing but siren now off, rolled up to the edge of the paved road and stopped. 2 officers, a young man and a seasoned woman, got out and approached cautiously. The officer in charge, the woman, looked at the chaotic scene. Pamela's panicked, ashen face, my calm demeanor, and the broken yellow chain. "Ma'am, sir, we received a call about a trespasser breaking into a property. Can you tell us what's going on here?" The officer asked, looking at Pamela, who was closest to the action. Pamela opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She just pointed a shaky finger at me, then down at the business card. I stepped forward, offering a hand to the officer. "Officer, my name is Alexander Thorne. I own this property, the Last Mesa Ranch. The individual who called you, Ms. Pamela Smith, is a board member of the adjacent development, the estates at Sunblaze Mesa. She is mistaken. She is currently standing on my private property, which she illegally accessed after having illegally obstructed my private access with that construction chain." I kept my voice polite, measured and utterly professional. I turned to Pamela, and this was the moment I delivered the killing blow. "Officer, I would also like to report a potential case of community fund misappropriation and a severe breach of fiduciary duty by Ms. Smith. As the CEO of the parent company that manages her HOA, I will be launching an immediate, full-scale audit into the estates at Sunblaze Mesa's financials, starting with the purchase of that illegal chain. Furthermore, I will be convening an emergency meeting of the management firm's executive committee this afternoon to discuss the immediate suspension of the entire board, pending the outcome of my investigation." Pamela collapsed against a nearby mesquite tree, literally gasping for air. The young officer stared at the older female officer, who was now slowly turning the Omni Governance business card over in her hand. Having accepted it from Pamela, the senior officer, who clearly had seen a thing or two, looked at me, then at the card, then back at me. "Mr. Thorne, I think we have everything under control here. It seems this is a civil and possibly a very complex corporate matter, not a criminal one. I believe Mrs. Smith needs to be escorted back to her property and potentially needs to sit down. We'll be filing a full report, but there will be no arrests." She gave me a knowing, almost sympathetic look. She understood immediately. A homeowner had picked a fight with the literal invisible hand of her own system, and she was about to be obliterated by bureaucracy. The aftermath was swift and total. I didn't just fire the management company. I couldn't, not technically, because I owned them. But I fired the regional manager who oversaw the Sunblaze Mesa account for being incompetent and allowing a board member to operate with such unchecked illegal authority. I had the entire estates at Sunblaze Mesa Board of Directors suspended that afternoon. Their keys to the community clubhouse were revoked, their access to the community bank accounts was frozen, and a temporary, non-resident corporate-appointed manager was put in place. The audit began the next morning. Pamela, as the ringleader, was the primary target. Not only was she forced to pay for the damage to my chain out of her own pocket, but the audit uncovered several smaller, less significant but still unethical, uses of HOA funds that she had overseen, including a rather expensive floral arrangement for her own birthday party that was somehow billed as clubhouse decor. She was not criminally charged, but she was personally sued by the HOA's insurance carrier, which, ironically, was also a subsidiary of my company, for the misuse of funds. The shame in the community was immediate and absolute. She went from being the most powerful woman in the estates to a pariah in less than 48 hours. She and Bob listed their house 3 months later and quietly moved out of state. My ranch is quiet again. The new HOA manager is exceedingly polite and understands exactly where my property lines are. They even sent me a nice bottle of wine as a welcome back gift. I'll tell you, the moral of the story isn't about power. It's about context. It's about not assuming you know anything about the person you're deciding to harass or look down on. That woman tried to use a flawed system to bully an innocent person, and she had no idea that I wasn't just in the system, I was the system. So like this video if you were on my side and you think Pamela got exactly what she deserved. Subscribe for more stories like this, where the most innocuous people turn out to be the ones holding all the cards, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far? Or was it a perfectly executed corporate counterattack? I'll see you all in the next story.